Good morning. Today on Spotlight, the race for Detroit mayor. In very short order, the registered voters of Michigan's largest city will head to the polls to cast their ballots. Who will they pick to lead that municipality for the next 4 years? Their choice, incumbent Mayor Mike Duggan or challenger attorney Anthony Adams. In a recent Spotlight interview, we sat down with Mr. Adams. But today, my conversation will be with the man who has occupied that top city hall job for the past 8 years. Why does Mr. Duggan want a third term? And what's his plan if Detroiters give it to him? It's Sunday, October the 17th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for joining us today on Spotlight. Campaign season can always be hectic, and many times you will have a person's attention for about 30 seconds, and in those 30 seconds, you've got to convince them why they should re-elect you. If there's something that is sort of anti these days, it's what people consider politicians who are in office over and over and over again. How do you fight that and say that I deserve one more term rather than fresh new blood? 30 seconds.
Well, if you look at the August primary, I'm not sure that's the case of voters of the city of Detroit, but people in this city know. We started out dealing with things like get the ambulances to show up, get the buses to run, get the streetlights on. Now we're building for the city's future, building affordable housing, getting Detroiters training and into jobs, bringing jobs into the city, and building the city's future. And I think this is a fun time. We aren't dealing with crises, we're dealing with the city's future, and that's exciting.
Sure. I know that in 8 years' time, there's just a laundry list of things that you could tick off as accomplishments during your administration. But if you had to look back and say, you know, the real hallmark of my administration over the last 8 years would be one or two key things that you would want to stick in that voter's mind, what would it be?
Well, I think if I've done one thing, is to change politics in this city. People used to run for office in Detroit with us versus them, run against the suburbs, run against business, run against Lansing, whoever it might be. You look at what's happened, the new Jeep plant that's brought 5,000 jobs to Detroit. That was the mayor and the council working together. The new Amazon Center be 2,000 jobs at the abandoned fairgrounds. That was the mayor and council working together. 8 straight balanced budgets. That's been the mayor and the council working together. And I think the city has been well served by an approach that says your elected officials, the council and I debate a lot, we disagree a lot, but at the end of the day, we're unified for the people of the city.
What's been the biggest challenge? I mean, that is a tough job, and it's like drinking out of a fire hose. Stuff is coming at you fast and furious all the time. But if you have to reflect back and say, one of the biggest challenges we had, but we overcame that challenge, what would it be? Would it be the bankruptcy?
Well, the bankruptcy we were out of in 2014. That we put behind us, and we're now on 8 straight balanced budgets. I think probably, and this is true for many governors and mayors across the city, we were at a point where we were landing one company after another in the city. We were at a point where 22 new businesses opened on Livernois and the Avenue of Fashion. We had the economy of the city moving the right way before COVID hit. And so COVID did 2 things. One, it was an immediate threat to the health of our residents, which I think we dealt with very strongly, but we still haven't recovered the economic momentum. I want everybody in this city to be able to have access to a good paying job or training or skills to get a good paying job. And we got slowed down a year and a half, but we're back on track now.
In the world of politics, so much of what gets done is about relationships. You've received support from Governor Whitmer. You've received endorsement and support from President Biden. Talk a little bit about the importance of that relationship and what benefits it has yielded for the citizens of the city of Detroit.
You know, I ask people this question, but in the last 50 years, how many years has a mayor of Detroit been able to work with a Democratic president and a Democratic governor at the same time? And people are shocked. It was just 2 in 2009 and 2010 when President Obama and Jennifer Granholm overlapped, and that was a period of time where Kwame Kilpatrick was on his way out of office. We have not had a time in a half a century where Detroit was backed by a Democratic governor and a Democratic president. In this case, they're both close friends of mine. They've And they've endorsed me, but I have years-long relationship with both of them. And it is absolutely paying off in road projects, in housing projects, in support for all of our activities. And this community health corps, we're reaching out to the poorest families in this city and going right into their homes and saying, what do you need? Let's help you. That's because of the federal and state government working with us in partnership to reach the people that too many times have been forgotten.
Yep. One quick question before we go into the break. You're doing very well in the polls for those who believe polls, and certainly there's always controversy regarding that, especially these times and very partisan times. You're doing well in terms of raising money in your war chest. And you've gotten a ton of endorsements and some of the most influential endorsements. What does that say to you that you want to now say to the people that makes a difference?
You know, what I stay connected to are the people, and I can't sit in living rooms every week as I have for 8 years because of COVID. We just can't jam 20 or 25 people in a living room as I used to go from neighborhood to neighborhood. So now it's fewer events. I'm doing one outside this evening, but every place I go, people are excited. Yesterday, we were over at Parkview Place in Elmwood, where the low-income seniors just had their affordable housing extended by 45 years and had all of their units rebuilt. If you had seen the emotional reaction as one after another came up and hugged me and saying, I've lived here for 10 years, I've lived here for 20 years, and now I'm secure. I'm getting that kind of reaction in pretty much every neighborhood of the city.
All right, your slogan on your campaign website is One City for All of Us. We'll talk about that right after this. And welcome back to Spotlight, talking to Mayor Michael Duggan, mayor of the great city of Detroit, the 75th mayor of the city of Detroit. Mr. Mayor, you know that in this job, every time you make a decision, you make somebody happy and then you make somebody else unhappy. So when you're in that job for 8 years, you're going to have your critics and you've got an opponent. I don't want to take time to go through the various things that they may be criticizing you on, because people can certainly go and get that website, but they will look back and say, well, it hasn't all been rosy during the Duggan administration. If they want to talk about, over property taxation, foreclosures, water disconnections, the COVID vaccines, the J&J being returned, bus driver safety, they'll go down the litany. But if there was one thing that you could look at that you're perhaps being criticized on and say, you know what, in hindsight, I really wish I could do over that, because maybe me and my administration did make a misstep there, and part of this is showing the vulnerability of politics. What would it be?
Yeah, we work hard every day, and I don't know that I go back and second guess, but things like overassessment, that happened in 2011, well before I got into office. My first month in office, I cut assessments across this city by 22%. People know that. It's why these kind of phony criticisms haven't gotten traction. But I wish we could have reached our poorest citizens early in the kind of support we're doing now. We're going into the homes, making sure people have food, making sure people are secure in their housing, getting folks into job training through the community health corps. We didn't have the resources coming out of bankruptcy to do that. Now with the American Rescue Plan, we're going to put $100 million into reaching out to those who have been left behind. And that's the kind of thing the city of Detroit's wanted to do for years. Chuck, we've got a record amount of money now, $30 million into home repairs for low-income seniors. Over the years, it's never been more than $5 or $6 million. The city didn't have the resources. That's going back 4 administrations. Now, we're going to do 1,000 roof repairs for longtime homeowners in the city of Detroit, low income. This is exciting. And so I'm focused on what we're doing going forward. And I think the people of the city, they're going to decide, is my life going to be better if I reelect the mayor in the next 4 years, or is it not? And ultimately, the residents of the city will make that choice.
I see billboards going up and down the freeway talking about what you've done in terms of the parks, and that would go to the quality of life issues. Some of your critics, certainly your opponent, will say, Yeah, but the balance has not been good, that you've given too much to the business community at the expense of the average citizen and the neighborhoods. How do you respond to that kind of criticism?
Well, my opponent got less than 10% of the vote in the city, the primary, making that argument. But people in this city know what's happened to property values in their neighborhood. They see their neighbors fixing up houses. 8 years ago, if somebody was on a ladder on a house, people were calling the police because they assumed it was a scrapper stripping somebody's house. Now you go up and down blocks across this city, and because the neighbors are coming back, people are moving back in. We've had 8,000 abandoned houses where people move back in, so you don't have a hole in the neighborhood. These are the kinds of things that we're doing. I think the residents know that, and I don't think there's any doubt if you look at what's happened on Livernois with the explosion of that corridor, what's happening now in McNichols, east of Greenlawn, what's happening on Kirchville, what's happening on Grand River. We are building the commercial strips back in the neighborhood, the kind of commercial strips I remember as a kid, that you didn't have to go out to Royal Oak or Birmingham to find a shopping district. You had one you could be proud of right in your own neighborhood.
One more question along this line, because I do want to talk about your vision for the future. I've moderated debates with you before, whether it was you sitting side by side with Sharon McPhail, and that was a heated debate, or former Sheriff Benny Napoleon, and you guys had a pretty good test up there, and you stood toe to toe. Your opponent says that you're afraid of him, that you will not stand side by side with him and debate the issues, whether you like what's coming out of his mouth or not. Are you afraid of him, and why won't you give him this opportunity if all of these things you've enumerated are positive things that you can stand on?
I did debate the candidates in the prosecutor race. As you know, I've debated Benny Napoleon multiple times. I debated Senator Coleman Young 4 years ago. These were candidates who had positive contributions and ideas. We got a candidate this year who's done nothing but spew venom, and he's entitled to do that as a strategy. But I don't need to give him a platform. But what I find really interesting is Mayor Coleman Young ran for re-election 4 times, and in none of those 4 races did he debate his opponent. We've gone back and researched the newspapers, and not one time did my opponent in this race criticize Mayor Young for refusing to debate. So his moral outrage at refusal to debate seems to be somewhat selective.
All right, we need to take a little break. When we come back, let's talk about what you want to get done if indeed the voters give you 4 more years in office. We'll be right back with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan. Stay with us. Mr. Mayor, if the people are nice enough to say, okay, a 3rd term for our mayor, what do you want to get done? What's visionary? What's coming down the pipe? What can they look forward to and say, that is the reason I should go in and say Mike Duggan?
We are moving past fixing crises. And, why don't the ambulances show up and the like? And we now have a clear vision of what we want to build. And one of the things I want to do is I want to build beauty in the city, not just knock down abandoned houses, but get rid of the eyesores, the rusted fences, the busted out signs on our commercial strips. I want to get the Packard plant and the Fisher 23 plant and the AMC plant and these terrible images of Detroit's decline, and get each of them either reused or the property redone. And then the biggest thing is this. We are not far from a city where anybody in the city who wants a good paying job can get one. We're going to create the path with Detroit at Work in the 8 centers, that every single person that wants to get the skills to get a good paying job, we will put them right into the training program, the placement, and the like. 4,000 people have been hired at the Jeep plant so far to these good middle class jobs. All 4,000 were Detroiters because of the deal we made. We made the same deal with Lear that's bringing in another 400 jobs for the seat plant for GM, and we're making the same deal with many other companies. And so we could be the city again. The city that some of us remember was the place, Detroit was the place you went when you wanted to get a job. I think we can be that city again.
Are you optimistic, given the pandemic that we're dealing with, that Detroit will make a full recovery? Because that's the big question mark all across the nation, all across the world, is we don't know what's coming next in terms of this pandemic. But based upon information that you've seen, that you may be privy to, that perhaps others don't see, are you optimistic that we're coming out of this?
I think we have another wave coming, and I won't be as bad, I don't believe, as last year, but we need to get vaccinated. But I think you're going to see one more wave come through here around Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then by spring, I expect us to be fully open and operating. Those are the things that I'm looking at. But we can speed that process up. This vaccine is a medical miracle. It is just remarkably effective, and there's no place easier to get a COVID vaccine than in the city of Detroit.
Will the current police chief do some of the things that you think need to be done in order to get a full control of crime, which is always an issue, not just here in Detroit? Any major city in America is dealing with that issue. It's a big city. But this chief, compared to the last chief, who's now running for governor as a Republican,
in the last 3 or 4 months, you have seen violent crime dropping in this city. Chief White focused on the nuts and bolts of the department. We have more officers on the streets. Now, I authorize a lot more overtime, but people in the city have noticed this summer more police cars on the street in patrol, more officers in parks, more officers at block parties. Any place a crowd was gathered, Chief White has been proactively deploying officers, and he's out recruiting. Yesterday, we announced a partnership with Wayne County Community College, where you can both get your associate's degree at the community college and get your certification as a police officer at the same time. So we get officers who are residents who grew up in this community, from this community, policing this community. And that was Chief White's plan with Dr. Curtis Ivory at the community college. This chief, I think, is going to prove to be outstanding.
You're going to see more change from the Detroit City Council than you've seen in a long time, just by virtue of all the things that people know, and those who won't be running again, can't run again, decided to step down and move on. A lot of new fresh faces coming. What does that signal to you that the voters should know? And are you optimistic that you're going to have a good relationship with that council, as smooth as one that you've already had?
We have a lot of very good candidates running for council, so that's a positive thing. But in 2013, we had major turnover on council and several new council members. And I sat down with each one of them and built a relationship. And they come from different philosophical backgrounds and different priorities, but when you sit together, I think we've served the city well. And when the new council is seated, I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did in 2013, which is sit down and establish relationships with each one of them, find common ground. And I think what everybody, and this is what I'm hearing from the candidates, is when they're knocking on doors, they want somebody who's going to work with the mayor. They don't want to go back to the days of the gridlock and the fighting, and I think we'll find common ground.
One quick final question. We have a new First Lady in the city. What should the voters know about her, and what do you hope she's going to do as First Lady? Does she have a particular agenda? Is there something that she would like to champion? She's certainly well-educated, well-trained in the medical profession. Is there something that voters can look forward to and say, that's what the new First Lady is going to do for this city?
Well, right now we're in the process of moving everything into the Duggan and dividing.
First things first.
For 2 weeks and getting a joint checking account and the like. But Dr. Sonia Hassan has for years been the governor's chair of her task force on infant and maternal health. She's devoted her whole life into babies being born healthy. But I also think you're going to find her interested in women in business and really creating more opportunities for women to start their own businesses. But I'm going to let her on her own. She doesn't need me to speak for her, but she'll evolve into that on her own once we get settled in for a few weeks.
All right, last question. If you get 4 more years, will this be the end of being mayor? Do you want to stay in that job, or you want to try to equal Coleman Young's record?
I won't pretend to know what might be in my future, but for the last 8 years, I've worked 70, 80-hour work weeks for the people of the city to try to make Detroit better. And if I get elected, I'm going to work 70, 80-hour weeks for the next 4 years. And I think that's what people expect of me and what is in store for me after that, I wouldn't begin to guess.
All right. Mayor Mike Duggan, thanks so much for spending time with us today on Spotlight. Best of luck on the campaign trail, and the voters get the final word on General Election Day. I'll be back with some closing thoughts right after this. Next week, one of our guests will be David Nafker, Executive Director of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers. He'll be talking about one of this region's most valuable resources. Here's a little preview.
In 2020, we launched the Great Lakes Impact Investment Platform, and at its root, what this is an opportunity to showcase a collection of sustainability projects in the region that are aiming to deliver both a financial return for investors and improvement for the region's environment. We've had a terrific response. It includes about 36 different projects, and it's involved a lot of partners. The way we finance water infrastructure and related projects in the region has really been changing. Historically, we had a model of using water, degrading it in one way or another, and then looking to government to restore it. And that's been changing, where government continues to operate a lot of programs that serve that function. But increasingly, more and more private investors, public-private partnerships, and others are looking for these kinds of opportunities where they can make a return and have this outcome connected to environmental improvement. And that's really what we're trying to harness and encourage for the benefit of the region and our people. We tend to be humble Midwesterners, but if you step back and zoom out and think a little bit about our regional economy produces $6 trillion in value every year. It would be the third largest country if it were its own country, just behind the US and China. So this is a huge economic engine for not just North America, but for the world. We're blessed with 20% of the world's fresh water in the Great Lakes, 85% of North America's. But of course, we have a lot of other water in the region as well, whether it's groundwater, Mississippi River watershed, or others. So what we're really trying to think about is how can we harness water to be our competitive advantage? We're blessed with it, and we have a choice of how to use it. And we think if we do it with a sustainability mindset and encourage projects like the one that are on the Impact Investment Platform, that really creates a very different future than some other parts of the world.
And remember, don't forget to vote on General Election Day, Tuesday, November 2nd. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.